Hello, good morning. I'm James J, and this is week 4. I think I'm going to start this week with a poem by Carol Ann Duffy. It's called Bees. I will need my glasses. Bees. Here are my bees, brazen blurs on paper, besotted buzzwords dancing their flawless airy maps. Been deep, my poet bees, in the parts of flowers and daffodil, thistle, rose, even the golden lotus. So glide, gilded, glad, golden, thus, wise, and know of us how your scent pervades my shadowed, busy heart, and honey is art. Figured I'd start with a little short one. Carol Ann Duffy. Carol Ann Duffy is the British Poet Laureate, has been in that position for a number of years. I think that she's an absolutely wonderful poet. And actually, if you think about that British Poet Laureate, it's history, pretty interesting. That prize goes back to Shakespeare's time, and so it goes back centuries and centuries. And she is a whole list of firsts. She's the first woman to have the position. She's the first openly gay person to have this position, and also the thing that actually was the most, I guess, difficult politically for them to get around. She's also from Glasgow, Scotland. That's right. And for folks that are familiar with that part of the world, that is a real strong working class town. And her parents had deep ties to workers' rights, labor's rights. So I almost thought about picking hers for last week for Labor Day, for when I read the Labor Day Seamus Heaney poem. But I thought I'd wait to this week. And that poem isn't overtly about labor, but it actually it delayed her for several years from getting a position. So yeah, absolutely terrific poet, Carol Ann Duffy. I'll get that posted. Also, that short little poem. I love the way that it works with the buh sounds, and it switches on. It switches on to the g, that just G sound as it gets working through there. So, and it ties into, I guess, as far as what we're thinking about art and what our next writing assignment's going to be. But before I get there, I'm going to talk a little bit today about what we've been up to as far as with some of the papers and what I've seen so far there. I'm going to talk about some of the reading assignments that are coming up and talk about the main writing assignment that's coming up. I'll also mention a little bit about some of the recitations. Things like that. We'll kind of go forward where we're at and backward, that type of thing, and see what happens. But yeah, I think what I'd like to do before I get going too far is I'll mention the papers. I know folks are generally pretty interested in the papers, and I think by the time this posts on Monday that I will have gotten some of those papers graded and back to you, and I still have some to go. I think I was hoping to get it done by Monday night. I'm not sure I'm going to make that Monday night idea, and I mentioned Monday night or Tuesday, so I think it's going to look more like Tuesday for everybody in terms of getting the commentary back to getting that commentary back to you in what order. There is no particular order. I just want to mention that as far as I've been in classes before. In fact, I remember years and years ago being a student and having a professor in particular that would, there'd be 30 or so people in class, not virtual, long before those things would have been possible. So it was an actual physical class, and he would take the papers and have them graded in order, from A, B, C, all the way on down, and he would hand them back in the order, and he would start, of course, with the best paper and work his way back. And so just the act of handing back papers became stressful to everybody. I don't know whether he did that deliberately or not. Hard to say. But there is no pattern, is as I tell that long, maybe not quite as interesting story as I'd hoped. As I tell that story, there is no particular pattern. I'm just going through. It's basically the same way that I went through from the emails and started downloading the files, and I think it probably does have chronological tended to pull the earlier ones and that type of thing. So I'm just rolling through. So if you've gotten feedback already, awesome. And if you haven't, it's going to be by Tuesday. You will have it. So overall, though, the comments I can make about that first group of papers is that this is a really strong start. I was a little concerned with doing everything online and just the different format and the potential challenges there, but we're off to a real good start overall. There were several patterns that that I'm going to actually generate some little mini lectures for this module as well. I'll tack those at the end of the module, and they'll have to do with some patterns that I saw overall in the papers. Overall, the openings were very good. I think people took some of those reading assignments we had pretty seriously when we talked about titles and opening lines, that type of thing. A lot of them were very compelling, and I could see that real solid work in that first, from the title, the first couple of sentences, and getting that hook going. That seemed to play out very well. Let's see. Overall, there was sort of, I'm going to do a lecture on scope of what you can cover, because one of the things that seemed to happen often, not in all papers, but just generally what would happen, is a lot of those openers were really tight. And I'm going along, and this is the sentence structure is sharp, it's engaging, I'm moving right along, and then it would feel like I got down to, for 500 words, right? And got down to the last 150 words, and it just shoved a bunch of stuff in there, and it got real general real fast. So that the writing started. You could see the rush and the difficulty in compacting the essay into 500 words. So I'm going to do a little lecture on that. There are solutions for that, of course, and that is totally. I would be surprised if that didn't happen. Right? That's normal. So great starts. I'll talk a little about scope. I'm doing a little mini lecture on scope. Related to that, I'll do a lecture on the idea of showing versus telling. Some of you may have already heard that in other writing classes. Some of you may have heard that quite a bit in other writing classes. It's one of those things. It's not a concept I invented by any means, but it's one of those concepts that if you spend any time writing, you'll hear that, and that's just simply the notion of, instead of saying how about we'll do a character as far as Bill. Bill was anxious. It's a matter of just showing those sort of things. Bill tapped his pen on the edge of the desk and sipped on his lukewarm coffee. Scratched his head, wondering what he'd do next, or something like that. It's adding those sort of details instead of relying on the bigger general abstractions to convey emotion. So I'll give a little quick lecture on that, show versus tell. We'll put that in quite a bit as far as on those comments. And then let me check my third one. Oh, and then the idea of closing. It's also hard to close these things down. So related to that scope, showing and telling, if you work on those two things, the third thing that'll come together for you is that close. And that's closing with an image oftentimes works pretty well. When you've gone through the short story, you've done some interesting writing, you've got an interesting subject matter, and things are moving along pretty well, and the reader's invested, and then of course you get to that last part, and you want to almost put, like, I think of it metaphorically, putting a bow on it. So you want to wrap up everything you've done in the previous 450 words in 50 words and put almost like a moral of the story type of ending. And a lot of times those fall flat. Not always. There's no absolute or always in writing, but a lot of times those don't tend to work that well because the reader's already with you. Right? The reader gets it, and especially everything else has been working out well for you. And it's hard to wrap these things up, and you want to make sure the reader gets the point of the story, right? Make sure the reader gets what you're up to. So the temptation is to put everything together and shove it all into those last few sentences and put a little bow on it. I would encourage you not to do that. So in fact, sometimes ending with a specific image or just a detail, and trusting that the reader will get what you're up to, and that image or that detail will be vivid in their minds is I think a more powerful way to close. Not 100% of the time, but oftentimes. So I may have suggested that quite a bit on those closes. Let's see. The other thing, the other general comment that I would put on there is, and this is related to the show versus tell, is there are a lot of very good visual images, and those seem to go throughout a lot of the writing. I'd also encourage you to pick up other type of images as far as use some of our other senses, so that getting that audio, that sound quality. There was one story in particular, and I'll never get into a whole bunch of details on people's writings as far as we'll keep that as far as anonymous, since we're not in a workshop where we can talk back and forth. But there was one person in particular that had a blacksmith character in there, so you get that clanging of the hammer, and so it started with that sort of audio image, and then that clang type of sound, and then it ended with that too, which made sense. And that was a good example, I think, of an image It wasn't even necessarily a visual image. So think about sense of smell. Was if your character's in a place, what's it smell like? What are some of the sounds about? Is the sounds that are helping kind of shape the mood of the story, those type of things. Sometimes that one or two, because these are short pieces, right? So just one or two images, and not always just visual, can really be striking. So those were the comments that I'd made. And as I said, overall, very good, very strong start. And we'll have a chance to keep working with those things and keep progressing. And it also, it was real nice too to get a chance to, after a few weeks, a few lectures, to get a chance to get something from all of you, to get that back. And also there are a few comments with emails, most of them kind of straightforward, but also what people were concerned about or that type of thing. So I tried to make sure to address any of those type of comments in the emails as well. So let's see, the other part of there along the lines of getting some feedback from all of you. I have the recitations. The recitations were great to get a chance to hear your voice and to put that voice with your writing. It's one of the things that is a limitation with the format that we have. So I wanted to try to work against that limitation, and I think that worked pretty well. I hope those weren't too terribly difficult in terms of, I know some people, they're just, as far as technology, they got it right there at the phones or wherever you're going to video, and are just natural at these things. Some people are not. I'm not one of those folks that's a big video person, as much as this class is. That's the way it runs. So that some people aren't necessarily that's their strong suit. So it was a chance to potentially do that. I also wanted to emphasize that the real thing with reading aloud, and I wanted to make a deal as far as making its own particular assignment worth quite a few points, and fairly relatively easy points to pick up. Basically, you do the thing, and you get them. But I wanted to do that because it is important to use your ear as part of your proofreading. So when you read things aloud, I hope that folks had that experience of thinking that, okay, I've got this story all set, polished, ready to go. And if you hadn't read it aloud before and you're trying to recite it for your video, it's the first time, I bet your ear, in all likelihood, caught some things where you said, well, hold on, let me go back here and let's get that fixed. Let's get that transition taken care of, whatever it might be. So your ear is a tremendous tool, and I wanted to use that recitation exercise to hopefully emphasize that. So that was the goal there, and it was also good as a good way of getting to, at least in a small way, getting to know all of you. So let me scooch down the list here. I think we're gonna have a relatively small reading assignment for this coming up week. So we're still sticking with flash fiction here, and the Rose Medal Press Field Guide to Writing Flash Fiction. And I'm just going to do one chapter. We're going to do Pia Earhart, who's on page 129 to 132. So we'll hit that relatively short piece. And I want to do it after, I wanted to cover this one after we were doing our first batch of papers. So this is one that I think is, I think it's interesting when thinking about revision. It's the title that Tapping Your Story for Load-Bearing Sentences. Now, when she starts out this chapter, she talks about the notion of doing a remodel on an old house. So she's got an old house and is seeing what walls can be knocked out, what walls can be kept. Starts getting into the concept of which walls are load-bearing and which walls can go. So she spends about a page writing about that, and then starts thinking about that, of course, as writers are inclined to do. How is that related to writing? And so one of the things that she gets that she's up to in this chapter is the idea of looking back through after you've written your piece. You've got it, good ways done, good, solid, strong draft, as these first assignments were. So you've got a good, solid beginning draft, and then how do you go through there and find just those few sentences that stand out, or that you think of those are the load-bearing sentences. If you pull those out, the whole story kind of just kind of lies flat. So how do you identify those, and how do you preserve those, and maybe even get kind of emphasize those a bit more? One of the things that for Earhart that she says is essential is that the element of surprise. So when she writes something that she's working along and writing her story, something that completely surprises her, and she says maybe even embarrasses her a little bit, or something that she wasn't expecting. That oftentimes becomes a pretty interesting line, or potentially interesting line. So that's one way for sure, and that's how she gets after that. She also has on page 131. She has a terrific example of a short flash fiction piece that is set with. It's written in the first person, and it's set where the family that kind of reflecting back on kind of a family incident with a father who's bought a sports car. They're in Italy, and he doesn't exactly know what he's doing with a sports car. There's potential. There's two kids and a mother, and there's the potential endangerment from this vehicle when it dies suddenly on the side of a hill and is rolling. So there's a little bit. There's tension. There's something at stake, but it's not wholly unbelievable. It's not. It's not from Space Invaders or something like that. Common everyday occurrence. And she has certain lines that pop through, and they're metaphor lines as far as a simile, the use of like, that surprises her, and it picks up a whole lot of emotional power in those spots. So that is definitely a section that's worthwhile checking out, and something to think about when you're going through this. As far as we'll read that, and it's just 4 or 5 pages. I'd like you to read that, and then perhaps go back through your first draft and look. What are the load-bearing sentences, or what are the sentences that caught me by surprise? What are the things that this overall story just has another layer, or just something that's striking because of those few sentences? If you cut them out, the whole story would collapse. Where's your essentials? And then also at the same time, when you're going through. Can you cut things that maybe aren't working as well? That aren't they're kind of either more more vague or more general, so that those things shine. So that chapter, we're just going to do that one chapter for this week, and with the idea of going back and looking at that first assignment. So let's see. And the next thing we have coming up, of course, it's because the weeks just go by quick. I don't know where they go. It seems like we blink and we just started, but this is week 4. So the next thing is our second assignment. I'll get that posted in this module as well. That'll be due on the 24th, so September 24th. You've got a little bit of time to get that done, but as with all these, if you start early, it takes off the pressure, and it gets you a chance to at least consider, make sure to read through the prompt. Think about, make sure you understand what's going on with it. So that second writing assignment, we're going to continue to write flash fiction, so 500 words, same scope or same focus with what can be covered. And then this time we're going to be responding, though, to some sort of visual art form, whether it be painting or photography, but something that's a visual art. And from there, the sky's the limit, and so to speak, to use a cliche, that we'll see what happens with that. But you're going to be responding to a certain visual image, and part of what, as far as thinking about how we're going to do this with this being a pandemic and doing this class distantly, is that in the past when we meet in person, we typically would go to either a gallery on campus or in the community, and would go over there and kind of browse through the gallery, check things out, wander around. We'd have that whole sort of experience of entering into a place, which I think is important sometimes to readjust our mind and to retune our senses. So you would normally enter a place and then start taking in the different visual arts, whether you're in an oil painting area or whether you're in a photo area or whatever it might be, but some sort of visual art form. And you'd wander about and something would strike you, and you say, oh, okay, that's it. And there might be a couple others. You might wander past half a dozen things that just aren't doing it for you. And then, okay, then maybe that one's it. And you go back through and you make some decisions about which one of these things is really striking to you. And then typically you take a little quick picture of it, and then flash photography, I guess, so we don't damage the paintings, but whatever the museum allows you to do in terms of getting that image, you'd have that image, and then you would write a response to that, whether it be the picture itself becomes real important, or whether it's just a catalyst to leap from, and let your imagination go wild with that thing. And in 500 words, what can you do with it? And it's a way, I think, of sometimes processing something that, depending on the style of art, some can be quite intimidating, so that we have to feel like we are a very serious student of art in order to engage with. I don't think that that's actually true, but that's something that can potentially be intimidating. I like the idea of approaching art, especially visual art, visual art form, and one that you may not be familiar with at all. I like the idea of approaching it as a writer. That is to say, what can you, as an active participant, as a writer, do with this, as far as how do you process and make sense of this, and what occurs to you as you're viewing this piece. So we can't do that in person. We're going to adjust, like I mentioned before, that old adage that any solution can be potentially a problem, and any problem could potentially be a solution, right, if we look at it just from a certain perspective. So what I'd like to consider is that instead of going to one local museum together, we're going to virtually go anywhere that you want to go. So what I was thinking about this, as far as personally, I remember years and years ago that I'd had this kind of crazy idea that wouldn't it be great to go to the Chicago Art Institute. And I was living in the Southwest, and through my town there was the Southwestern Railroad, the Amtrak ran from L.A. to Chicago. Chicago was the end of the line. I just had this idea that wouldn't it be something to go and ride this train. It would take several days from where I was at to reach Chicago and go to that Chicago Art Institute. There was a particular exhibit or a particular painting that I'd wanted to see that had to do with Oscar Wilde's character in the picture of Dorian Gray. And I don't know why. It was one of those, sometimes you get things in your head that you want to do. There was all sort of, it's not like I could get several days off from, I was in my, I guess, early teens when I had this idea. So I was working and not in any sort of position where, I think I was working retail, and I wasn't in any sort of position where I could take a week off to go and look at a painting and then catch the train back. And so that never really happened. But one of the things that has happened is the Chicago Art Institute has a tremendous virtual tour. I think they had it before the pandemic, but they've really expanded that so that I can go there now and have, and I've gone to the link, and I've included that link in the, or I will include that link in the second writing assignment, and I can browse all around, and I can see all this. I can take my time with it. It is absolutely different than going to the museum, of course, where you get the sounds of the people, the smells, the different light, what time of day it is matters, night, all that kind of stuff with the experience, because we're in control of, to the degree we're in control of anything, but as far as our space and what we set up around us. And then, of course, it's been positioned, the artworks are positioned in a certain, ideally, kind of perfect way for viewing, for you to do so with the screen. So it's different for sure, but I think it gives you a chance to see some of those things. So I've had a chance to then see this Chicago Art Institute online and virtually. So it got me thinking about there's if you thought, well, the Smithsonian, wouldn't that be great to see, or to to think about. I'd like to go to the Met in New York or whatever it might be. Now's the chance. So may as well take advantage of that. As far as we may as well take what looked like a liability and turn it into an asset. That's what I think this year is very much all about. So that's how we'll do that. You can also still go with something regional or local. Most of the places do have online museums and virtual tours. So that is something that you could go with for sure. I know that in Flagstaff, Arizona, which is where I'm at currently, the Museum of Northern Arizona here it's absolutely tremendous, and so that and it's regional, so it's set as far as with what you see over there is it goes back to 19th century pioneers, goes back to indigenous peoples, it goes to contemporary art exhibits that for current regional artists that you may not, you wouldn't find in the Smithsonian, you wouldn't find in these big national galleries, So the regional museums are absolutely on the table for you to go to and examine. They may or they may not have all their exhibits up depending on their funding, but it's worthwhile to check out. If there's something you've been looking for, I'd like you to please take that opportunity to embrace that and have fun with it. Okay, so yeah, that'll be the next assignment. I think half of it will be looking around because we've got at least the virtual world as our potential subject matter to respond to. You may as well, I think, spend some time searching through that and make sure to give yourself some time searching and thinking about that. So, if there isn't a particular museum that jumps out right at you, the Chicago Art Institute is a pretty good one. But have fun with it. You don't have to pick that because that's it happens to be the one that I'm interested in, and I like to do these assignments with students, and it keeps me fresh and that type of thing. And so that's the one that I ended up doing the second assignment with. And yeah, so I think that kind of wraps up that second assignment. Thinking about that, I'm gonna scroll through my notes here because I don't want to keep this video going too terribly long, but. Yeah, let me make sure I haven't missed anything exactly. No, I think that's good. I think we are off and running. And to go back to what I had started this video with, terrific start, very good start, especially under tough conditions. So I very much appreciate your effort and the willingness to just jump right in there and get things rolling. Sometimes it's that first step becomes the most difficult. Second paper, I think, won't be as difficult in that you will have already began and you will have already made some of those first brave steps to getting things rolling. So we'll get that second assignment posted. I'll also have some of those mini lectures in this module for you to check out. Please do make sure to check out those things, even if you ended up with your paper being almost like 95% there, it's was sure good, or even if you ended up in that spot where you took a wild swing, you didn't quite hit it, but you went for it, and maybe it's only 70 or 80% there. Either one, that is absolutely fine. I think it is worthwhile to check out some of those mini lectures, and if I'm covering things where you say, yeah, of course I know that. I know that I need to show my details as opposed to summarize and tell. Awesome. And if it's something where it's like, I'm not exactly sure what you mean, click back through that thing, and or kind of shoot me an email if there's questions that you have about those lectures, and if I happen to mention some of those terms on your paper, do spend a little bit of time with those mini lectures and see how that might work. It's again, we have that little delay with it. It's not the same if we were in class where we could just back and forth talk to each other, and I could kind of look around and see your eyes and see your expressions, whether it's making sense or whether it's still a bit hazy. We could do that. So of course in person a lot easier, but what we'll do is proceed this way. And as far as with me posting as many lectures, and you can shoot emails back to me with questions and that type of thing. So I think I can leave those comment threads too, if I remember right with the modules, if you wanted to put any sort of comments on there, or questions or clarifications, and I can make sure to check those too. So, all right, week 4, this is going to be an excellent week to look back at what we've done, do a little bit of revising, and jump in early. Get that get thinking about what museum, what gallery you want to view, and find one particular photo or one particular painting that you want to respond to. That's the toughest part. All right, have fun with that, and then get cranking, get writing. Okay, well, hope you all are doing well. If there are any questions, concerns, that type of thing about the writing assignments, if you're getting stuck somewhere, please let me know. We'll be happy to at least pass on some of the writing strategies that I have for getting you going again. All right, thank you so much. We'll see you next week.